Good evening, everybody.
Hi, Nicole.
How are you?
Great.
Good. I wanted to thank you, first of all, for joining us and for doing this with us this evening. Um, Such a beautiful day out there, and we just appreciate you all being here. This is such a lovely event, I believe, on Sunday nights. It's such a nice way to sort of wind down your weekend and just get rested up and ready for the week. So we just really appreciate you all being here. And Charlotte, we appreciate you doing this for us. So my name is
Thank you.
Nicole. I'm from Second Stage. If there's any questions along the way and you want to write them in the chat, that's just fine. We'll have some time at the end to open up for discussion and comments or questions if you have any for Charlotte. And in the meantime, if you can, the listeners, if you can just keep yourselves muted, that would be great. And without further ado, I'll introduce Charlotte Morgan and hand things over to you, Charlotte. And please, if you don't mind, give us a little introduction of what you'll be reading.
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I decided tonight that I'd read a bit of a sampler of my work. I'll begin with 3 poems from my recent chapbook, Time Travel. And then at Sunny Monk's request, I'm delighted to read from my first novel, an excerpt, One August Day. And I'll conclude with selections from my recent memoir, Are You Greg Smether? And I'll give you a little introduction. I want to say thank you for doing this Read to Me series. I'm delighted to be here this evening. I, of course, first thought of my own memories of reading to my own children when they were young, and what a pleasure that always was. But then I thought back to the person who really introduced me to my love of poetry, and that was my grandmother. And she didn't read to us in the evening, but she did recite poetry. She declaimed. She had memorized, I guess it was from that older tradition of learning to memorize poetry, and she would recite to us, and that was a special treat. And I'm glad I remembered that. And the first poem I'm going to read from my collection, Time Travel, is called Homemade, and it's a tribute to my grandmother, who lived with us more than a decade and was instrumental in raising me. Homemade. She'd hammer a 10-penny nail into the rounded end of a coconut, always 3 holes. Milky, thin liquid would drip all day into a glass, slow as sorghum. After, she'd pound the brown, hairy skull, crack it open to the glaring white meat. Piece by jagged piece, she'd shred it. Eggs, vanilla, flour, sugar, coconut, milk. She'd beat them all and pour thick batter into silvery tins. While 3 layers baked, she'd boil 7-minute frosting into thick peaks, and I'd lick the cake ball until it shone, the milk of coconut sweet on my tongue. Our tiny house exotic for that scented hour. After Christmas dinner, she'd present this wonder of a cake, a shaggy white crown on a cut glass tiered stand, stiff and grand, to slice into golden wedges. My grandmother's sole gift to our crowded family. Now I ponder, how did she, who never left our city house, who sent my mother to shop for weekly groceries, how did this country woman learn to bake this regal coconut cake? Next, I'm going to read the title poem from the collection, Time Travel. I used to take the train everywhere. Santa's helpers, they called us, high school girls in red jumpers giving out candy, leading carols, charming children on the Santa train to Ashland to pick up the Snow Queen and her phony elf. Once, Spring break, money spent, not a nickel in my change purse. I sat up all night from Homestead to Richmond, shivering, hungry. It's not nice to say shut up, man, my boy said on the way to Fort Lauderdale, where we picked limes in the backyard and saw orchids, waves of orchids inside a restaurant. The silver meteor pushed 3 boys off the trestle tracks. I waited, watched divers pull 2 motorcycles out of the river, saw a mother scream. Those paper cone cups for water, the dining car's shining metal teapots, the rough textured surface of the seats. I used to take the train everywhere. The third poem I'm going to read introduces a topic that grabbed me and wouldn't let go after my first daughter was born. She was not quite a month old. What we call the Camille flood took place here in Virginia. What happened was Hurricane Camille came off the Gulf Coast and up inland to the mountains of Virginia. And I guess because I had a newborn, that story of the unexpected tragedy and the loss of life really stuck with me. And 20 years later, I read a news article about some of the people involved in the in that devastation, and that grabbed me and stayed with my imagination. And when I went to VCU to study for my Master of Fine Arts in Writing, I wrote the novel based on those 24 hours of the Camille flood in Nelson County, Virginia, and it was called One August Day. But I went to Nelson County repeatedly to do research, to learn about the lay of the land, the geography, the syntax of the people, to hear them talk, and to get a much better feel for Nelson County. So the title of this last poem I'm going to read from the collection is Camille. By the time I was going there with my husband and my second daughter, it was considerably later. My older daughter was in college and my younger daughter was 5 years old. This poem is called Camille. I remember my daughter astride a headstone calling, "Take one of me too," as I snapped the facts I'd read about, haunted by this hillside Camille washed clean. Roger, Rebecca, Mitchell C., James and Annie, all Huffmans, lost, memorialized, graven in gray stone. Another 16 rest, eternally recovering from the blows of Paleolithic rock and mud, air full of bark and grass, too thick with rain to breathe. 5 hours, 37 inches, 120 dead. Now the Huffman family reunion here on this grass hill as gently grazing cows guard above them. Audrey Zirkle, barely 16, home early from band practice, hung all night in a tree calling, "Hold on," to her sister. She wasn't there the next morning. Found days later by her fancy dress date, shiny skin almost overlooked the color of the sand that buried her. She was naked to the waist, preserved like one of those ship's ladies recovered after centuries, head arching upward on the floor of the sea. Red gladiolus rise up from her urns, the color of her corsage the night she danced and danced. That led to this novel, One August Day, that I wrote at Virginia Commonwealth. And it's called One August Day because in terms of looking at this huge human story of this natural catastrophe, I finally figured that telling it in 24 hours was perhaps the way to manage it. And I took 5 characters that I created, and their lives merge unexpectedly because of the storm. And of course, as with any unexpected disaster, the people involved don't see it coming. So I'm going to read one excerpt. Monday, August 19th, 1969, Richmond, Virginia, 4:18 a.m. Stirring to her son's restless sleep sounds, Helen Jansky roused from her own deep slumber. Shaking herself awake, forcing herself up onto her elbows, she had no inkling as she looked toward the hands on the softly lit face of the bedside clock that she wouldn't be lying back down in her warm bed again. The time, 4:19. She groaned. Stevie's moaning, his insistent nuh-uh, interrupted the soul calm and quiet Helen usually experienced in a day. Easing her heavy, warm body from her side of the bed so as not to bother Joe, her mommy antenna fully alert now, she felt her way out the dark room, down the hallway to her son's half-shut door. She was the only one of the 5 of them who had a room to herself. He was the only one of the 5 of them who had a room to himself. She breathed a silent thank goodness for that small advantage. The others might not hear. He kept whimpering louder and louder, thrashing the air in front of him with his hands, kicking the top sheet down under his feet. Helen moved toward the sound, touched her oldest child's shoulder soft and easy, said in a whisper, "Stevie, honey, you're all right, Stevie." He sat up rigid. While Helen couldn't see his facial features, she sensed the shocked animal fear in his stiff shoulders and chest. "Mama's here, Stevie," she assured him, barely touching his thin shoulder again. He turned toward her. "Mama, go back to bed, Mama, please. Don't wake him up." His voice, too, was no more than a hurried, faint murmur, as though a lurking intruder might hear him, might figure out where he was and come for him. Helen moved closer to her son, tried to soothe his sweat-damp hair. "What were you dreaming, Stevie? Tell me." She shook her hand away, lying back down. "Please, go back to bed, Mama." "You sure you're okay?" "I'm sure." "All right, love you." She tiptoed to the hall, stopped outside the door to listen until she could hear his steady back to sleep breathing. What in the world were Stevie's nightmares about? He wouldn't tell her, insisted each time he was fine. He didn't want her to come to him. Still, she hated not being able to comfort him like she had when he was little and woke in the dark needing to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water. What in heaven's name did he dream about that frightened him so? The bad dream nights had only started this summer. The first few times she'd been uneasy, but told herself it was only the heat and the humidity that caused him to be restless. The city could be brutal in July. They all had a hard time getting settled. But the nightmares kept on night after night, and the noises he made sounded like someone terrified beyond all reason. In daylight, Stevie refused to talk about the dreams, even to her, begged her please not to mention them. Helen ran her fingers through her thick, dark hair, feeling helpless. Stevie was awake again already, probably exhausted. Stevie was asleep again already, probably exhausted, but she was fully awake. Might as well tiptoe back to the room, shut off the alarm, get going on the day, she decided. Usually she was up at 5:15 anyway. She could sort the clothes she'd brought in from the line late yesterday, start breakfast. Cream chip beef and biscuits. Joe liked that, but it had been too hot, even first thing in the morning lately, to cook anything in the oven. Still, he insisted on a big breakfast, said a man couldn't be expected to do a day's work on cereal. That's what she'd do, fix cream chip beef and biscuits. Weekend food. Stevie would like that too, though she'd have to leave it on the stove for him and the girls to reheat since she'd be at work before they got up. Quiet as a cat, Helen made her way down the dark hall toward her bedroom. If she tried to get back to sleep now, she'd only fidget in bed, maybe wake Joe. No, she'd best leave him be. She paused at her daughter's doorway. The faint aura from Amy's seashell nightlight made her two sleeping girls look soft, hazy, like the dreamy children in picture books. Neither stirred. Apparently, the others hadn't heard Stevie. For an instant, Helen had the illusion all was well. Grateful for the moment, for the peaceful, settled feel of the house, she padded to her bedside, guided by the clock's faint bluish green glow. Not needing to see what she was doing, with that ease of familiarity, Helen pushed down the alarm button. Time to start the day. So those are samples of my poetry and fiction. My most recent book is a memoir titled Are You Greg's Mother? And I found memoir far harder to write than fiction or poetry, which might seem contradictory. You have all the information. It all belongs to you. You're not inventing things, but telling a personal story, I think, is always harder. It was particularly hard for me. I wrote this memoir initially as just for myself, as a way of understanding my situation as a mother, raising a son who developed a severe mental illness as a teenager. And I was grappling as a writer, writing things down, trying to understand all the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and all the signals. But beyond that, that sensibility as a mother, trying to do the best by your child. So I'm going to read the prologue from this. I want to leave you time for questions, and the prologue is quite short, but anyway, are you Greg's mother? Oh, what I wanted to say, people sometimes ask, well, it is so personal, why did you write it? And it's important to me as I learned that dealing with mental illness can be a lonely experience. It can be alienating. And for me, as I decided to open it to a wider audience, I thought, well, maybe that tap on the shoulder that says, I understand, I've been there, would be a comfort and a connection. So that's why I eventually published it. Are You Greg's Mother? Greg's daycare graduation occurred one bright June afternoon. Parents were invited to see the little ones get their diplomas and have cookies and juice afterward. We were outside. The sun was shining, but not too hot, and I had a sense that things would work out for our broken family eventually, even though I had no idea how. After the brief ceremony, I stood by myself while Greg horsed around with some of his friends. He didn't hang on me much anymore, which pleased me. My ex-husband, Will, was standing off by himself, but that wasn't unusual. One of the aides, a woman I'd seen often but hadn't officially met, walked up to me. Are you Greg's mother? She asked. Why, yes, I am, I answered, smiling. Could I talk to you for just a moment about Greg? Sure. We stepped away from the noisy children. I feel like I have to say this. I hope you won't be upset, but I need to tell you. Greg's an angry little boy. What? I lost my breath. I just thought you ought to know. She walked away, leaving me with the sensation that I'd had the wind knocked out of me. I wanted to say, wait, what do you mean? Why would you say a thing like this? But I couldn't speak. Greg never threw tantrums, never hit other children or took their toys, never complained. A sweet-natured child, he hardly cried unless he was physically hurt. Usually, there had to be blood for him to so much as whimper. He was dear to me, petting my cheek, kissing me goodnight, telling me he loved me. I didn't know what to make of what this woman said, except that it hit a raw nerve. I went up and hugged him goodbye. He was going with his dad for the weekend, and he had an innocent smile on his face, his cheeks all pink from playing. He looked like the most normal, healthy, happy boy in the world. But when I got in my car, I cried and cried. She had to have him confused with someone else. Did she say Greg? Certainly, she meant some other boy. Then why was I sobbing? I promised Nicole I'd leave 10 minutes for questions, and I think I've used up my reading time. So thank you, Nicole.
Yes, thank you very much. Wow. That must have been, I really appreciated you sharing that with us and just also explaining sort of your motivation for, like you said, opening up the audience. Because you're right. I'm certain that you're right. People need to know that they're not alone in these situations, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you. Anybody out there have any questions or comments about the readings? Please go ahead and speak up if you do. I'll give you a minute to think about it.
Charlotte, it's Sunny.
Hi, Sunny.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
I'm at camp, and I'm really glad that I actually managed to hear you. Your sharing is just so lovely. I've known you a long time, and every time you do a reading, you share something new, and I really appreciate it. I want to be with you as soon as I can.
Yes, yeah, that would mean a lot. Good. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Laura.
Hey, I love that. I've already read that last book, and I just want to say it. I feel like it's even more universal than people. I mean, it feels like anybody would relate to it. I love the woulda, coulda, shoulda element. Anybody anybody in the world would appreciate it because it was just, and I noticed how much you did in that prologue that I didn't notice. I mean, I couldn't put the book down, but I noticed how well you paced it,
Oh,
which I
thanks.
didn't really notice. I mean, I just read the book, but like, I love how you said a broken family and then kind of left that for a beat. And you're sort of like, ooh, broken family. What,
Right.
did that come naturally, or was the pacing something you had to really work out?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you, Laura. That was buried deeper in the book, more in its linear fashion. And when I was getting some feedback on it, one of the women who read the book for me suggested a prologue. And for some reason, that scene struck me as the right scene for the prologue. So actually it had been embedded in the correct chronological place, but I moved it up.
Yeah, that's neat.
Thanks.
Well, it's amazing how the question, "Are you Greg's mother?"
Really?
is so ominous in that scene.
Right. And that's exactly how it happened. It's amazing to me when you are working on your own life, how visual those memories are and how you have access to them. I don't think I have one of those great memories, but something like that, I just can play it like a movie. I guess because it mattered to me.
That's neat.
Thanks.
Charlotte, I want to say thank you. This is quite a treat for a Sunday at home. And I cannot wait to go out and get your book.
Oh, thank you so much, Cindy. Do you have a question?
No, just a thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for listening. That's important.
Where can we buy your book?
All of my books are available on Amazon. I'm sorry,
Great.
I love to support independent bookstores, but in this day and time, it seems like the publisher, I think, sells it. Are You Greg's Mother is Legacy Book Press, and Time Travel is Finishing Line Press, and I'm sure they would sell it. But the easiest access today is Amazon. So thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'll give a quick plug for this Movies on the Lawn event that we have coming up on
Yeah.
Friday nights in May. So if you feel like going outside and enjoying some nice weather and spreading out and watching a movie, do come to Second Stage on Friday nights in May, because we will have a lovely event there on Friday nights. So I'll give that a plug. And if you have any questions, want to know more about Second Stage, please visit our website, secondstageamherst.org. And there you can sign up to join our e-newsletter, and also watch for information about our online market. The market is going to remain online a little bit longer, and then I'm hoping to bring it back live. I don't know exactly when, maybe June or July. We're not quite sure yet, but hoping to be able to set up live vendor tables again soon at Second Stage. So always wonderful things going on there. So please do stop by. Also, I'll give a quick shout out to Baines Books and Coffee. This is the coffee shop that's inside of our building. And I like to mention it to our literary friends here in case you drop by, you want to look at the bookshelves, have some coffee, please do that. And we'll be glad to show you around the building as well. So I guess without further ado, unless anyone else has any other questions that you thought of or comments. Okay.
Good night.
Thank you all so much for joining us. You have a lovely Sunday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.